the haunting road, and the endless inside. The sky was a pre-dawn shade of blue as they drove along the deserted road east of town, heading south. The air was crisp, and the world was just beginning to stir. Old houses lined the street, their windows dark and lifeless, standing as silent witnesses to the early morning. Beside them, a vast grass field stretched out, shrouded in a misty haze. In the car, Sarah sat in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the surroundings. Her husband, Jack, was focused on the road ahead, while their children, Mia and Alex, dozed in the back seat. Sarah couldn't shake off an eerie feeling that had settled over her since they left home. They were on their way to visit Sarah's sister, Emily, who had recently moved to a small, secluded town called Ravensend, a place steeped in mystery and old folklore. As they passed the field, she suddenly saw them. Wispy, translucent figures moved slowly among the tall grass, their forms barely distinguishable in the dim light. A shiver ran down her spine as she realized they were not real people. It was too early for anyone to be out there. "Jack, look!" Sarah exclaimed, pointing towards the field. Jack glanced over, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" "Ghostly figures. Over there," she said, her voice trembling. Jack squinted, but before he could respond, one of the figures, appearing to be a young ghostly child, noticed their car. With a swift motion, it threw something at them. A ball, ethereal and glowing, arced through the air, passing harmlessly through the vehicle. Sarah's heart raced, and she couldn't help but glance back, but the figure had vanished into the mist. They continued driving slowly, approaching a group of sheriff's deputies gathered at the scene of a recent car accident. The deputies were investigating a crash involving two teenage boys, a tragic event that had shaken the small community. As they drove past, Sarah spotted Emily among the deputies. Emily, busy with her work, acknowledged them with a wave. Sarah waved back, understanding that her sister was occupied. She decided not to disturb Emily and let her continue with her duties. They arrived at Emily's house, a large, welcoming home that seemed out of place in the quiet, eerie town. The sense of unease didn't leave Sarah, especially with the accident scene still in view down the road. Across the street stood an old, creepy house, its windows dark and foreboding, contrasting sharply with the warmth of Emily's house. Sarah and Jack got out of the car, with Mia and Alex waking up and following behind. "Emily said she'll join us later. She's busy with the investigation," Sarah said, trying to shake off the lingering discomfort. After settling in and making themselves comfortable, Sarah's curiosity got the better of her. The eerie house across the street seemed to draw her in. She felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it held answers to the unsettling events of the morning. A few hours later, Emily arrived home, visibly tired but smiling. Sarah approached her with concern. "Emily, is everything okay with the investigation? We saw something strange in the field." Emily's smile faded slightly, and she quickly changed the subject. "Don't worry about that now. Today is supposed to be about family. By the way, thanks for remembering my birthday." The family gathered in the dining room to celebrate. Sarah lit the candles on Emily's birthday cake, and everyone sang "Happy Birthday." The room was filled with laughter and warmth as they enjoyed the cake and caught up with each other. The adults talked about their lives and shared stories, while the children, curious and full of energy, explored their aunt's spacious house. It was later, after the festivities had died down, that Sarah realized Mia was missing. Panic set in as she and Jack began to search the house. They called out for Mia, but there was no response. Sarah's heart raced as she checked each room, her fear growing with every empty space she found. "Mia!" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing through the halls. "Mia, where are you?" After an exhaustive search of the house yielded no results, Sarah's eyes were drawn to the creepy house across the street. The ominous feeling from earlier returned tenfold. She knew in her gut that Mia had somehow wandered into that house. "I think she's in there," Sarah said to Jack, pointing across the street. Jack nodded, worry etched on his face. Without hesitation, Sarah hurried to the old, creepy house. As she approached, the air seemed colder, the shadows deeper. The front door creaked open as Sarah reached for the handle, as if inviting her in. Inside, the house was dimly lit and filled with an oppressive silence. The hallways were narrow, and the air was thick with dust and decay. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she cautiously moved through the rooms, calling out for Mia. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and in that brief moment of darkness, Sarah felt a cold hand brush against her arm. She spun around, but there was no one there. Panic set in as she realized she was alone in the house. She called out again, but the silence remained unbroken. As Sarah wandered through the house, ghostly lights continued to haunt her, just barely in the distance, flickering and dancing at the edge of her vision. She was drawn to noises that sounded like Mia's voice, faint and distorted, echoing through the empty halls. "Mommy, help!" The voice was distant but unmistakable. Sarah's heart clenched as she followed the sound, her hope and fear intertwined. Sarah opened a door to a particularly dark room. As she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her, and she was plunged into darkness. She fumbled for a light switch but found none. Her breathing grew rapid, her heart pounding in her ears. Suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching. A faint, eerie glow illuminated the room, revealing an entity standing in the corner. It was a shadowy figure, its form constantly shifting and writhing. Its eyes glowed a malevolent red, and it seemed to suck the warmth from the room. Sarah backed away, her fear mounting. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The entity remained silent, its gaze fixed on her. Then it lunged. Sarah screamed and fell to the floor, scrambling to get away. The entity's cold, clammy hand brushed against her leg, sending a jolt of terror through her. She kicked out, connecting with something solid, and the entity recoiled with a hiss. Desperation fueled her movements as she crawled toward the door. She grabbed the handle and wrenched it open, stumbling into the hallway. She didn't stop running until she was several rooms away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. As she pressed on, she stepped into another room with rotting floorboards. Before she could react, the floor gave way beneath her. Sarah fell, crashing through the wood and hitting the ground below with a sickening thud. Pain exploded in her head, and darkness quickly enveloped her. When Sarah regained consciousness, she was disoriented and in pain. Her head throbbed, and she could feel blood trickling down her forehead. Her body ached from the fall, and she realized she had sustained several injuries. Slowly, she tried to sit up, wincing at the sharp pain in her side. She found herself in a dimly lit basement, the air damp and musty. The room was filled with old, decaying furniture and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. Panic set in as she realized how deep underground she was. She had to find a way out, but every movement was a struggle. Sarah pushed through the pain, determined to find Mia and escape this nightmare. She stumbled through the basement, searching for any sign of an exit. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the faint sound of dripping water. Hours turned into a few days as she navigated the endless maze. Ghostly lights and Mia's distant cries continued to taunt her, pulling her deeper into the labyrinth. She uncovered hidden passageways and secret rooms, but the way out remained elusive. Each time she thought she was making progress, she would find herself back in a similar room, as if the house was toying with her. One night, as she wandered the labyrinthine hallways, she heard Mia's voice again, clearer this time. "Mommy, help me!" The sound was coming from a grand old ballroom. The room was shrouded in darkness, the air thick with dust and decay. Sarah entered, her flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Mia!" she called out, her voice echoing through the vast, empty space. There, in the center of the ballroom, stood Mia. She was facing away from Sarah, standing unnaturally still. "Mia!" Sarah called again, relief flooding her. She rushed forward, but something felt wrong. Mia didn't move or respond. Sarah shone her flashlight on Mia's face. To her horror, Mia's face had changed, twisted into a grotesque mask of malice, her eyes glowing an unnatural yellow. As Sarah approached, the entity that seemed to possess her daughter suddenly looked directly at her with a piercing gaze and said, "Hello, Mommy," in a witchy, distorted voice. The possessed Mia lunged at Sarah with terrifying speed, her eyes blazing with malevolent intent. Sarah screamed, stumbling backward as the entity swiped at her. Just as suddenly as it had appeared, the possessed Mia vanished into the shadows, disappearing into another part of the house. Trembling and gasping for breath, Sarah knew she had to find Mia and confront whatever malevolent force had taken hold of her daughter. Determined to save Mia, she pressed on, even as the house seemed to close in around her, the ghostly lights and eerie sounds growing ever more oppressive. Her flashlight flickered and went out completely, plunging her into darkness. Desperation set in, but then she remembered the pack of matches in her pocket from the birthday cake. She recalled the special pack of matches her deceased father had given her, with "Lucky 7" printed on it from a casino he once frequented. Ironically, there were 7 matches left in the package. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out the matches. Breaking a leg from one of the old chairs in the room, she wrapped it in a tablecloth and created a makeshift torch. She struck a match and lit the cloth, the small flame flickering to life and casting long shadows on the walls. The light from the torch gave her a bit of courage. She cautiously followed the direction where she thought Mia had vanished. The torchlight cut through the dark openness of the house, but it did not reach the other side. There was a rotted smell, and as she walked, she saw dried drag marks of blood on the floor. Morbid fear crept back in as she knew she had to follow it to where it led. On the other side, she found a giant altar made of human bones, with demonic symbols carved into it and wisps of light trapped around it. In front of the altar stood Mia, entranced by the dark spectacle. Sarah called out to Mia, but she did not answer. Fear kept Sarah a distance away, but love for her daughter kept her from running. "Mia, it's Mommy. Come to me, sweetie," Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling. Mia remained still, her eyes fixed on the altar. The demonic symbols seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the trapped wisps of light flickered as if in pain. Sarah's heart ached with both fear and determination. She took a step closer, her grip tightening on the makeshift torch. "Mia, please!" Sarah cried, desperation seeping into her voice. Slowly, Mia turned to face her. For a moment, hope surged in Sarah's heart, but it was quickly dashed. Mia's eyes were still glowing with that unnatural yellow light, and her face twisted into that grotesque mask of malice. "Mommy!" The witchy, distorted voice said again, sending chills down Sarah's spine. The possessed Mia took a step toward Sarah, her movements jerky and unnatural. Sarah fought the urge to flee, knowing she couldn't leave her daughter behind. She stood her ground, her love for Mia giving her the strength to face the entity controlling her child. "Let her go," Sarah demanded, her voice steadier now. "Take me instead." The entity in Mia seemed to consider this for a moment, its glowing eyes narrowing. Then, with a horrifying screech, a mysterious force threw Sarah back towards one of the bookcases, spinning her around and pinning her to the ground. She struggled to reach the torch, which lay almost out of reach on the ground nearby. Summoning all her strength, Sarah managed to grasp the torch and threw it toward the bookshelf, setting it ablaze. There was a ghostly, painful, loud groan as the fire spread, and the hold on Sarah was suddenly gone. The burning books gave her courage, and she rushed to grab her daughter, who was released from the trance and stood confused about where she was. "Mia, it's okay. Mommy's here," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she held Mia tightly. Mia blinked, her eyes returning to their normal color. "Mommy?" she said weakly. "Yes, sweetie, it's me. We're going to be okay," Sarah assured her, holding her tightly. The flames began to engulf the house, the fire spreading rapidly. The intense heat and growing roar of the blaze caught the attention of Jack, Emily, and Alex, who had been waiting anxiously across the street at Emily's house. They watched in horror and fear as the flames consumed the old structure. "Look, it's Sarah and Mia!" Emily shouted, pointing toward the front door. They saw Sarah and Mia stumbling out of the burning house, the bright light of the fire illuminating their path. Jack, Emily, and Alex ran to meet them, relief flooding their faces as they saw Sarah carrying Mia. "Thank God you're safe!" Jack exclaimed, rushing forward to hug them both. Sarah smiled weakly, her strength nearly spent. "We made it out," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. As the family embraced, they watched the house continue to burn, the flames casting eerie shadows on the surrounding buildings. The oppressive darkness that had once enveloped the house was now replaced by the bright, cleansing fire. As they walked away from the creepy house, Sarah glanced back one last time. The building seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, she thought she saw the ghostly child watching them from a window. She smiled, feeling a sense of closure. The journey had been harrowing, but it had also made her stronger. She had faced her fears and emerged victorious, ready to embrace the world outside with a newfound appreciation for life.